What if I told you the first vampire in Tamriel wasn't born from death, but from a feverish transformation? Lambie Bale's curse began when Malak Baal's blood mingled with her mortal wounds, sparking an undead state that would spread across the land. This wasn't just a disease, it was a deliberate act of violation, a cosmic design that echoes through every vampire's bloodline. The origins of vampirism are darker than you ever imagined. LeMay Ball was a healer in the early First Era, a priestess of RK who traveled the wilderness curing the sick. That changed when Molag Bal noticed her. He appeared as a wounded knight at her camp, feigning injury to gain her trust. When she knelt to treat him, he attacked. His violation wasn't just physical. It was a calculated corruption of her divine purpose. As he forced his blood into her wounds, it mingled with hers, rewriting her very essence. She didn't become a vampire immediately. First came the fever. Molag Bal didn't just create a monster. He engineered a paradox. LeMay was now immortal, yet her body decayed. She could heal others, but only by draining their life. The people she once served saw her as an abomination, and when they drove her into the wilderness, she embraced what she'd become. Survival demanded it. Her first victim was a hunter who stumbled upon her cave. She drank deeply, and for the first time since her transformation, the hunger subsided. That's when she realized the truth. Vampirism wasn't just a curse. It was a new kind of power. The gift, as Molag Bal called it, had rules. LeMay's blood could pass the curse to others, lesser strains that lacked her direct connection to the Daedric prince. But those she sired still carried traces of her torment. Every vampire descended from her line inherits fragments of that original violation. Echoes of LeMay's suffering woven into their very being. Some accounts suggest this is why vampire hunters often find them drawn to places of sorrow, why abandoned chapels and ruined tombs feel like home to them. The metaphysical implications go deeper. LeMay's transformation altered RK's cycle. Vampires don't just defy death, they disrupt the natural order. Their souls caught between Mundus and Cold Harbor. This rift is why necromancers sometimes seek vampire allies, and why certain Daedric cults view them as living conduits to oblivion. Molag Bal didn't just create predators. He made walking breaches in reality itself. By the time LeMay accepted her fate, she'd begun reshaping the curse to her will. She established the First Coven, blending necromantic rites with twisted versions of RK's rituals. Her descendants would form the earliest bloodlines, each adapting their shared affliction differently. But no matter how far the curse spreads, it always traces back to that moment in the wilderness. Molag Bal's blood, a healer's broken faith, and the birth of something that should never have existed. What's chilling isn't just the act that began it all, but how calculated it was. Molag Bal didn't want mindless monsters. He wanted creatures who understood their damnation. who carried his cruelty in their veins. That's the real horror of vampirism. It's not the fangs or the hunger, it's the knowing. Every vampire who drinks from the living is repeating LeMay's choice in miniature. Survival at the cost of their soul. Yet there's a reason the curse persists. Power always tempts, and for some, immortality is worth the price. The next stage of transformation reveals just how gruesome that bargain becomes. Vampirism isn't an instant transformation. It unfolds in 3 distinct stages, each more harrowing than the last. The first sign is crimson fever, a sickness that mimics the common flu but hides something far worse. At this stage, the infected experience severe fatigue, muscle spasms, and a rising internal temperature, despite their skin turning unnaturally cold. Their veins darken, visible beneath the skin, like ink spreading through water. Victims report an aversion to sunlight, describing it as a dull but persistent ache. The fever lasts between 3 to 7 days, during which the body begins rejecting food. No matter how much they eat, hunger persists. Legends say this is when the soul starts detaching from Arce's cycle, though the infected rarely understand what's happening until it's too late. The second stage, shadow thirst, marks the point of no return. The fever breaks, replaced by an unbearable dryness in the throat. Not just dehydration, but a craving for something sharper. The afflicted senses heighten, especially their perception of moving blood. They hear heartbeats like drumbeats, smell iron in the air from open wounds. Some describe it as tasting color. Bright red hues become almost edible. Minor vampiric traits emerge. Fangs elongate slightly. Nails harden into claw-like points. But hunger dominates everything. At this phase, consuming blood temporarily relieves the symptoms, though it accelerates the transformation. Scholars debate whether resisting the thirst delays the final metamorphosis or merely prolongs suffering. Records from the Mages Guild suggest that willpower alone can't stop the process. The curse reshapes biology, not just desire. The final stage, dark rebirth, completes the transformation in a single night. Unlike the gradual progression before it, this shift is violent and irreversible. The body convulses as the spine realigns, joints cracking while new muscle fibers knit together. The skin pales further, becoming almost translucent in some bloodlines. Eyes shift color, often to amber or crimson, while pupils thin into slits resembling a predatory cat's. Most notably, the canines fully extend into fangs, capable of piercing flesh with surgical precision. At this point, sunlight becomes lethal. Even brief exposure blisters the skin, while prolonged contact ignites flames. The reborn vampire gains their full suite of abilities: enhanced reflexes, the power to mesmerize prey, and in rare cases, mastery over illusion or frost magic. But these gifts come with permanent costs. The speed of progression varies based on bloodline purity. Those afflicted by LeMay Ball's direct descendants transform within days, especially if they willingly consume blood early on. Weaker strains, like those from lesser vampires, might take weeks to advance through the stages. Some accounts suggest intense emotional trauma can accelerate the process. Grief or fury acting as a catalyst for the curse's magic. One documented case from the Second Era describes a Breton knight who completed all 3 stages in less than 24 hours after watching his family die in a bandit raid. His journal, recovered by Vigilance of Stendar, detailed how his thirst became uncontrollable the moment he buried his wife. But here's what most don't realize. The transformation isn't just physical. With each stage, the mind warps alongside the body. Memories of mortal life grow foggy, emotions dull, except for hunger and territorial instincts. Some vampires report feeling echoes of their human selves, remnants of love or guilt. But these fade over centuries. The few who resist this mental decay often do so through obsessive focus, whether on revenge, research, or retaining some twisted semblance of their past morals. The stages don't end with dark rebirth either. Ancient vampires continue evolving, their powers deepening with age. Those who survive centuries might develop unique abilities tied to their bloodline's traits, like summoning mist or controlling minds en masse. But no matter how powerful they become, all vampires share that same origin. Crimson fever's ache, shadow thirst's torment, and the night they ceased to be mortal. Which raises the question, what separates a common vampire from the pure-blooded elites who command them? That hierarchy holds secrets even most undead don't know. Vampire society operates on a strict hierarchy, and at its pinnacle stand the purebloods. Unlike transmitted vampires, who gain the curse through infection or accidental exposure, purebloods are created intentionally through a rite called the Bloom of Blood. This ritual isn't just a turning, it's a rebirth into nobility. The process begins with the prospective pureblood drinking directly from an elder vampire's veins until their heart stops. Then comes the critical phase, immersion in a bath of blood harvested from at least a dozen sacrificial victims. The candidate must drown in it, die, and resurrect within the viscous pool. Those who survive emerge with powers far beyond ordinary vampires, their bodies permanently infused with the essence of Molag Bal's original gift. The differences between purebloods and their lesser kin are stark. Where a common vampire might possess basic night vision and strength, a pureblood can manipulate frost magic with minimal effort, summon gargoyles from Cold Harbor, or even shapeshift into more predatory forms. Their regenerative abilities border on immortality. Severed limbs regrow within hours, and only sunlight or specific enchanted weapons can inflict lasting harm. More unsettling are their mental capabilities. Pure bloods don't just mesmerize individuals. They can implant suggestions in entire crowds, warping perception so thoroughly that victims willingly offer their throats. Historical records from the Imperial Census describe isolated villages where populations vanished overnight, with surviving livestock showing no signs of struggle. Only neat twin punctures on every corpse. Power this extreme demands rigid structure. Pure Blood Society organizes around houses, each tracing lineage to one of Lame Bal's earliest progeny. The oldest and most formidable, like the Volkihar of Skyrim, rule vast territories through networks of lesser vampires, bound by blood oaths. These hierarchies aren't advisory. They're enforced via the blood bond, a supernatural compulsion that prevents subordinates from harming or disobeying their creators. Attempting to resist triggers agony so intense it can reduce a vampire to a twitching heap. Some scholars argue this system mirrors Oblivion's own chain of command, with Molag Bal's will filtering down through layers of obedient intermediaries. Political maneuvering among purebloods is both subtle and brutal, since outright warfare risks drawing attention from vampire hunters or rival clans. Most conflicts play out through proxies. A favored tactic involves manipulating mortal institutions, corrupting Jarl's courts, infiltrating merchant guilds, or sponsoring bandit raids to destabilize regions. The Grey Host's attempted conquest of Western Skyrim in the Second Era demonstrated how effectively vampires could exploit existing tensions. They turned Nordic infighting to their advantage, letting mortal armies weaken each other before sweeping in to claim the remnants. The most chilling aspect isn't their power, but their perspective. Purebloods view mortals the way farmers view livestock, not as enemies, but as resources to be managed. They meticulously track population growth in their territories, ensuring steady feeding without provoking organized resistance. Some even cultivate herds of willing thralls through generations of selective breeding and conditioning. Texts recovered from abandoned covens describe harvest festivals where these humans parade before their masters, competing for the honor of being turned. Yet even purebloods answer to those above them. The eldest among them, those who witnessed the First Era, rarely involve themselves in petty politics. Their ambitions stretch centuries ahead, playing games with pieces mortals can't perceive. Rumors persist of a hidden conclave, the Crimson Curia, where these ancients debate policies affecting all vampire kind. Whether this council truly exists remains unconfirmed, but it would explain certain coordinated actions, like the simultaneous assassinations of multiple vigilants of Stendar in 4E201. One thing is certain: wherever purebloods gather, Their influence distorts reality itself. Their presence causes strange phenomena, corpses reanimating without necromancy, blood coagulating unnaturally fast, even localized eclipses. Mages studying these zones report that magic itself behaves differently, as if the area resists Meridia's light. This isn't mere superstition. The Elder Scrolls themselves reference dead spots in the fabric of Nirn, where Molag Bal's grip tightens. For vampires, lower on the hierarchy, ascension is nearly impossible. Only a pure blood can create another pure blood, and they rarely share that privilege. The few recorded exceptions involve extravagant betrayals, like the case of Lord Harridan, who engineered his sire's demise during a vampire hunt, then performed the bloom ceremony with the Elder's still warm blood. Even then, success isn't guaranteed. For every vampire who survives the bloom, a dozen dissolve into piles of calcified ash. This rigid system ensures stability, but also stagnation. Younger purebloods chafe under ancient traditions, while lesser vampires dream of usurpation. The tension simmers beneath every interaction, every shared feeding ground. Yet, none dare upset the balance, not with the Volkihar watching, waiting for any sign of weakness to exploit. Their castle isn't just a stronghold. It's the heart of vampiric power in Skyrim, and its rulers won't tolerate rivals, weakening their dominion. Perched on an iceberg in the frozen northwest of Skyrim, Castle Volkihar serves as both fortress and symbol, the undisputed seat of power for Tamriel's most formidable vampire bloodline. The Volkihar aren't mere predators. They're architects of a creeping dominion that has endured since the First Era. Their stronghold defies conventional siege tactics, accessible only by crossing a narrow, treacherous ice bridge that vanishes beneath intruders at the vampire's whim. The castle itself seems carved from glacial remnants, its spires rising like jagged teeth against Skyrim's pale skies. Inside, the air carries a perpetual chill, so cold that mortal breath frosts instantly, a byproduct of the Volkihar's unnatural affinity for frost magic. What sets the Volkihar apart isn't just their age, but their mastery over winter itself. Where other vampires rely on stealth, the Volkihar wield cold as both weapon and shield. They freeze blood in a victim's veins before feeding, a technique that numbs pain and prevents struggle. Their most feared ability, Glacial Prison, encases enemies in ice so thick that witnesses report seeing frozen screams preserved beneath the surface. This connection to frost runs deeper than mere spells. Their very presence lowers temperatures, causing unseasonal blizzards across Hjalmarch. Farmers whisper of vampire winters, sudden storms that descend without warning and leave livestock drained of blood but untouched by scavengers. The Volkihar's territorial control operates through layers of proxies and psychological warfare. They allow local legends to exaggerate their prowess, knowing fear does half their work. Jarls near their domain avoid provoking them, turning a blind eye to disappearances in exchange for vague promises of protection. The Coven's influence stretches beyond Skyrim's borders. Trading routes near Solitude show higher rates of frostbite deaths, a euphemism for vampiric feeding. Their spies move through noble courts, using a combination of mind control and blackmail, ensuring political decisions tilt in their favor. One recently recovered missive from a Dawnstar merchant begs the Jarl for aid, claiming entire fishing villages now serve as reserves, where the Volkihar take their due each winter. At the heart of their ambition lies a goal that borders on the apocalyptic, blotting out the sun. Ancient scrolls in the castle's library speak of the tyranny of the sun, a prophecy enabling vampires to walk freely in daylight. The Volkihar pursue this through twin strategies, hoarding artifacts like the Bloodstone Chalice to amplify their power, while manipulating events to weaken sunlight's influence across Tamriel. Their agents infiltrated the College of Winterhold during the Oblivion Crisis, smuggling out celestial charts that hinted at solar eclipses ideal for ritual magic. More recently, they've taken interest in the Dragonborn prophecy, seeing its potential to destabilize the region enough for a full-scale takeover. The Coven's hierarchy mirrors Cold Harbor's brutal efficiency. At its peak stands Lord Harkin, a pureblood, so ancient his skin resembles cracked porcelain. Beneath him, creatures like Vingalmo and Fura Bloodmouth enforce order through a mix of intimidation and twisted mentorship. Even among vampires, the Volkihar are considered extreme. They practice cannibalistic rites where new members must consume their mortal families to sever lingering attachments. Their dungeon holds thralls, kept barely alive through alchemy, blood bags for emergencies or political bargaining. Unlike the secretive Cyrodiilic bloodlines, the Volkihar embrace their monstrosity. They hunt openly when convenient, leaving drained corpses arranged in mocking parodies of Arkay's burial rites. During the War of the Bendramach, they slaughtered an entire battalion of Bretons and hung their uniforms from the castle's gates like grisly banners. Yet they're not mindless. Every act serves their long-term vision. When confronted by the Dawn Guard, they didn't just attack. They spread rumors that the hunters were werewolf sympathizers, turning villages against their would-be protectors. Their castle reflects this calculated duality. Grand halls lined with stolen tapestries showcase their cultured pretensions, while the lower chambers reveal the truth. Blood vats for the Bloom ritual, cells where captured mages are forced to research sun-blocking magic. The pinnacle of their power lies in the Ancestor Glade below the castle, where they've corrupted a sacred clearing into a focal point for anti-solar rituals. Here, during the winter solstice, they enact ceremonies that leech warmth from the surrounding land, testing the boundaries of their dark prophecy. The Volkihar represent vampirism at its most unapologetic, a stark contrast to their rivals in Cyrodiil. While others hide among mortals, the Volkihar reshape the world to suit their needs, turning Skyrim's harsh climate into an extension of their will. Their endgame isn't survival, but domination. A Tamriel where frost lingers in perpetual twilight, and every living thing exists at their pleasure. Yet even as they plot, another faction proves that subtlety can be deadlier than brute force. The Cyrodiilic vampires, who've woven themselves into the Empire's very fabric. While the Volkihar wield power through terror and frozen dominance, the Cyrodiilic vampires take an opposite approach. They rule from the shadows of polite society. Originating in Cyrodiil's heartland, this bloodline mastered the art of daylight survival through a chilling discovery: consuming the blood of other vampires. This cannibalistic practice, known as sanguine tempering, allows them to walk under the sun without bursting into flames. Their tolerance isn't perfect. Prolonged exposure still weakens them, but it grants them something far more valuable: the ability to manipulate mortal institutions undetected. The Cyrodiilic operate through covens disguised as aristocratic salons or scholarly circles. In Anvil, they pose as a wine merchant guild, hosting tastings where the vintages contain traces of sedatives. In the Imperial City, they've infiltrated the Arcane University under the guise of studying hemomancy. Their most brazen stronghold lies in Skingrad, where Count Hasselor has ruled for over a century without arousing suspicion. His court physicians administer a tonic to visiting nobles that dulls their memories of any nocturnal encounters. The city's guards report fewer crimes than anywhere in Cyrodiil, not realizing the peace stems from missing beggars and travelers disappearing before they can file complaints. What makes the Cyrodiilic uniquely dangerous is their psychological manipulation. They don't just feed, they cultivate dependency. A merchant might wake feeling unusually vital after a late-night negotiation, unaware his new business partner laced his brandy with vampiric blood. Over months, the merchant grows stronger, more charismatic, until he can't function without his lucky amulet. Actually a charm containing his patron's essence. By the time he realizes the cost, he's in too deep. Records from the White Gold Tower describe noble families passing down such trinkets as heirlooms, each generation more ensnared than the last. Their political strategies exploit mortal bureaucracy brilliantly. When the Synod attempted to investigate missing mages in Skingrad, the Cyrodiilic strategically leaked rumors about necromancer activity near Bruma, redirecting attention while they eliminated the Inquisitive. They've manipulated tax codes to bankrupt rival landowners, ensuring only thralls control key trade routes. Even their feeding follows patterns designed to avoid panic. Rather than draining victims completely, they take just enough blood to cause fatigue, passing it off as a lingering illness. This restraint prevents the mass hysteria that would invite witch hunts or Dawnguard intervention. Count Janus Hasselor exemplifies their methods, appearing as a middle-aged noble prone to migraines that excuse his daylight absences. He's hosted every emperor since Titus Mede I. His legendary vineyards produce a rare vintage that grants temporary euphoria, a side effect of trace vampiric enzymes. Imperial census data reveals Skingrad's population has remained suspiciously stable for decades, despite plague and war elsewhere. The truth lies beneath Castle Skingrad's wine cellars, where Hasselor keeps a dungeon of retired servants whose coordinated disappearances would arouse suspicion if they vanished all at once. The Cyrodiilic understands something other vampires often miss. Absolute control requires consent as much as coercion. They sponsor bardic colleges to romanticize night dwellers, fund temples to RK with stipulations that clerics denounce vampire myths as superstition. When Vigilants of Stendar gather evidence against them, compromising letters about the Order's own corrupt members mysteriously surface. Every action serves a dual purpose, whether it's a charity hospital where patients donate blood for research, or an alchemy shop selling sun protection tonics that just happen to contain vampiric saliva. Unlike the Volkihar, who see mortals as prey, the Cyrodiilic treat them like chess pieces. Prison records show arrestees for petty crimes often receive reduced sentences if they agree to join the Skingrad Guard, a unit with unusually high rates of night patrol assignments. Census takers, who note inconsistencies in household sizes, receive promotions to remote counties. The bloodline's influence even extends to the Elder Council, where proposals benefiting Hasselor's holdings always seem to find support. Their greatest weapon is patience, where other vampires chafe under centuries of hiding. The Cyrodiilic thrive by letting mortal lifespans erase inconvenient memories. An elder might spend decades grooming a banker's grandson, after ensuring the grandfather died, believing his fortune came from lucky investments. They've turned the Empire's short attention span to their advantage. After all, who questions prosperity? Skingrad flourishes. Its count ages only subtly, and if certain travelers never leave, well, the roads are dangerous. This veneer of normalcy conceals preparations for something larger. Hasselor's recent acquisitions include quarries mining siltstone, a porous rock ideal for constructing underground vaults. Ship manifests show regular deliveries of alchemical ingredients to his estates, not for blood substitutes, but preservation spells. The Cyrodiilic aren't just maintaining their status quo. They're building something, quietly ensuring that when the next great crisis shakes Tamriel, they'll emerge not as monsters to be purged, but as saviors offering order amid the chaos. Meanwhile, beyond the Empire's borders, another faction rejects both subtlety and settlements. The nomadic blood matrons carry LeMay Bal's legacy across the land in a perpetual crimson exodus. While the Volkihar solidify their frozen empire, and the Cyrodiilic manipulate Cyrodiil's courts, the blood matrons carry LeMay Bal's legacy across Tamriel in a never-ending pilgrimage. These nomadic vampires don't build castles or infiltrate governments. They move like a slow-moving storm, leaving changed lives in their wake. Originating from the first daughters LeMay sired after her transformation, the Blood Matrons maintain traditions older than most mortal kingdoms. Their caravans traverse forgotten roads, following celestial patterns only they understand, bound together by something deeper than blood, a shared vision of vampirism as sacrament rather than curse. At the core of their existence lies the Crimson Feast, a ritual that reshapes their followers into literal family. Unlike the violent turning ceremonies of other bloodlines, this rite begins with consent. Mortals seeking immortality endure 3 nights of tests, holding a red-hot brand without screaming, fasting until their veins protrude, reciting Oblivion's secrets backward. Those who pass kneel before the matron as she slices her palm, letting droplets fall into a chalice mixed with their blood. When they drink, the transformation begins, not as a disease, but as a guided metamorphosis overseen by the coven. Survivors describe it as drowning awake while their organs rearrange themselves. The process takes exactly 49 hours, mirroring LeMay's original torment under Molag Bal's hands. The matrons rule through a matriarchal system where age equals authority. The eldest, known as the first daughter, leads the caravan through ancestral memories implanted by LeMay herself. Younger matrons handle specialized roles. The War Daughter trains fledglings in combat. The Ghost Daughter masters stealth and illusion. The Song Daughter preserves their oral histories through hypnotic melodies. What appears disorganized to outsiders is actually a precision machine. When a matron dies, her successor consumes a thimble of her ashes mixed with blood, inheriting fragments of her knowledge. Through a process the Dark Brotherhood once tried and failed to replicate for their own purposes. Their mobility makes them nearly impossible to eradicate. When the vigilance of Stendar razed one of their camps near Falkreath in 4E 180, within a week, 3 remote chapels dedicated to RK burned down under suspicious circumstances. Witnesses reported seeing hooded figures moving against the wind before each fire started. The matrons don't engage in open warfare. They retaliate through disproportionate, symbolic strikes designed to terrify. A single missing child from a vigilance family does more damage to morale than a dozen dead hunters. Tracking their movements reveals chilling intentionality. They follow ancient geomantic lines where magicka collects, timing arrivals to coincide with lunar eclipses or planetary alignments favorable to blood magic. Mages Guild records note increased vampire sightings along these invisible pathways every 63 years, the exact interval between LeMay's transformation and her first sired offspring. The caravans never stay long enough to provoke serious retaliation, but always linger just long enough to seed new vampires in strategic locations. A farmer near Whiterun might disappear, only to resurface decades later as a tavern owner in High Rock, with no memory of his turning, yet compelled to leave doors unlocked on moonless nights. Unlike other clans, the Blood Matrons maintain detailed genealogies, tracing every member back to LeMay. These records aren't written. They're preserved through a living archive of thralls called the Remembrance. Each child pledged to their service undergoes a grueling ritual where vampire blood replaces their spinal fluid. The resulting hybrids exist in a twilight state, neither fully dead nor alive, their minds storing centuries of Coven history. Kill a Remembrance thrall, and you erase irreplaceable knowledge, a safeguard, ensuring even enemies hesitate to strike them down. Their influence extends through proxies rather than territory. A merchant clan in Elsewhere might receive gifts of oddly preserved spices that subtly addict customers to the taste. Blacksmiths in Hammerfell unknowingly forge weapons using matron-provided ingots, laced with vampire ashes, creating blades that hunger for their wielder's blood. Their most cunning ploy involves financing bardic colleges across Tamriel. The songs composed there carry subliminal rhythms that make listeners more susceptible to vampiric suggestion. The true scope of their network became apparent during the Three Banners War, when all three alliances reported soldiers experiencing identical nightmares of a woman with serpentine fangs. Investigation revealed each regiment had been supplied wine from different vintners, all tracing back to a single caravan that crossed Cyrodiil 18 months prior. By time the connection was made, the Blood Matrons had already vanished into the Velothi Mountains. What makes them uniquely dangerous is their patience. Where the Volkiar seek conquest and the Cyrodiilic crave political control, the Blood Matrons play a generational game. They've survived every purge, every crusade, because they don't congregate in numbers large enough to warrant annihilation. A single matron with 2 fledglings might operate unnoticed in a city for decades, weaving a web of influenced minds ready to awaken when called upon. And when the stars align again, when the next crimson feast begins under the right constellation, their scattered descendants will remember where to march and whose blood truly rules Tamriel. Yet even their diffuse power pales before the terror once unleashed by history's most organized vampire force. The Grey Host didn't just hunt. They waged war with the precision of an imperial legion. Formed during the interregnum, this coalition unified vampires, werewolves, and necromancers under a single banner, the symbol of a skeletal hawk grasping a crimson moon. Unlike solitary predators or secretive covens, they operated as a military force, conquering territory through coordinated assaults and psychological operations. Their strongholds followed a deliberate pattern. Castle ruins near major trade routes, abandoned mines converted into troop barracks, shipyards commandeered to build vampiric navies. At their peak, they controlled entire sections of High Rock and Skyrim's western reaches, turning the land into what contemporaries called the Deathlands. Recovered battle plans reveal their strategic genius. Before attacking a region, Grey Host agents would spend months softening defenses. Grain shipments mysteriously spoiled, causing food shortages. Town guards received anonymous bribes to neglect night patrols. Local priests found their holy symbols tarnished by an unknown corrosion resembling dried blood. By the time armored figures appeared on the horizon, morale had already collapsed. The host's signature tactic involved sending waves of resurrected corpses, not to kill, but to exhaust defenders before fresh vampire units struck under cover of artificial fog conjured by their necromancers. Their organizational structure mimicked mortal armies, but twisted to suit undead needs. Standard infantry consisted of ghoul thralls, corpses reanimated with just enough intelligence to wield weapons. Vampire knights called Dread Riders led cavalry units atop undead steeds that didn't tire. Most feared were the Morag Tong defectors, known as Veil Shadows, assassins who used stolen Dark Brotherhood techniques to eliminate enemy commanders before battles began. At the top ruled the three Blood Marshals, vampire lords who communicated through shared dreams and never appeared together, making decapitation strikes impossible. What set the Grey Host apart was their understanding of infrastructure. They didn't just drain villages, they industrialized feeding. Captured populations were sorted into categories, documented in ledgers still stored in the Imperial archives. The young and healthy became bloodstock, kept alive through alchemical infusions to prolong usability. The elderly and infirm were turned into labor thralls for construction projects. Those with magical aptitude faced the worst fate, being transfused with vampire blood until their souls fractured, creating unstable but powerful battle mages called Sanguineers. Imperial investigators later found entire underground farms where victims hung in harnesses like grapes on a vine, their veins tapped through silver tubes. Their most devastating weapon wasn't physical, but psychological. The host employed a specialized unit called Echo Weavers, vampires trained in illusion magic who infiltrated refugee camps. Posing as survivors, they spread tailored nightmares through whispers and altered memories. Soldiers would recall seeing comrades willingly walking into vampire camps, when in reality, they'd been dragged, screaming. This erosion of trust proved more effective than any siege engine. After the fall of Farron, survivors refused to help each other, convinced anyone could be a host sympathizer. The Alessian Order's eventual victory came at tremendous cost. They discovered the host's critical weakness, their reliance on the Blood Marshal's psychic network. By capturing and torturing a low-ranking vampire officer named Verilor, they learned each marshal maintained a physical anchor, an artifact containing part of their essence. Destroying these objects caused cascading failures in the host's coordination. The final battle at the gates of Evermore saw the Order's knights battling frenzied undead formations that no longer retreated or reinforced intelligently. Records describe vampires attacking their own ghouls, werewolves frozen mid-transformation as conflicting orders reached them. Yet, remnants survived. Scholars believe the host intentionally scattered cells throughout Tamriel before their collapse. During the Fourscore War, a mercenary company in Hammerfell displayed tactics identical to the host's shock infantry. In 4E201, Dawn Guard patrols near Dragon Bridge reported encounters with undead wearing tattered gray tabards. The true horror lies in their legacy. They proved vampirism could be militarized. The Blue Divide Pilgrimage, a secret training manual, recovered from a Sentinel vault, contains passages lifted directly from Grey Host doctrine. Their strategies continue influencing monster hunts to this day, with modern vigilance orders still training soldiers to check for the skeletal hawk emblem hidden on prisoners. The host's collapse reshaped Tamriel's balance of power. For centuries afterward, rulers avoided concentrating too many vampires in one force, fearing another coordinated uprising. This paranoia indirectly led to the rise of smaller, more secretive bloodlines like the Cyrodiilic, who we've already discussed, proving that sometimes defeating an enemy just scatters the threat in new directions. One artifact, in particular, emerged from this conflict as both trophy and warning. The Bloodstone Chalice, said to contain the last drops of the final Blood Marshal's essence. The Volkihar clan's obsession with this relic suggests they learned dangerous lessons from the host's ambitions. Their version of domination might be quieter, but no less devastating when enacted upon the world. The Bloodstone Chalice isn't just a relic. It's the beating heart of Volkihar power. Carved from a single piece of hematite mined in Cold Harbor, its surface always feels wet to the touch, as if fresh blood seeps through the stone. The enchantments woven into it by Molag Bal himself serve one purpose: to amplify and refine vampiric potency. When filled with blood, preferably from a pure-blooded source, the chalice catalyzes a reaction that concentrates its power. Drink from it, and ordinary vampires gain temporary abilities rivaling their elders. For the Volkihar, it's not just a tool, it's the cornerstone of their hierarchy. The rituals surrounding the chalice reveal its true horror. During the monthly eclipse rite, vampires gather in Castle Volkihar's lowest chamber, where the artifact rests on an altar of frozen bones. Each participant contributes a measured amount of blood into the chalice, creating a mixture that bubbles without heat. As the liquid darkens, it separates into layers. The weakest blood rising as froth to be discarded. The most potent sinking like syrup. Those deemed worthy drink this essence, undergoing transformations that would normally take centuries. Eyewitness accounts from captured thralls describe bodies distorting, skin splitting to accommodate new muscle, fangs lengthening with audible cracks. The rite isn't without risk. Fail to metabolize the infusion properly, and the vampire's own blood turns to corrosive sludge, dissolving them from within. Geographically, the chalice's influence stretches far beyond Skyrim. Volkihar operatives transport diluted fractions of its power across Tamriel in alchemical vials. These blood shards graft slivers of the chalice's enchantment onto lesser artifacts, creating localized points of vampiric control. In 4E201, the Dawnguard raided a smuggling operation in Riften, uncovering ledgers detailing shipments to Hammerfell. Each delivery coincided with a spike in missing persons reports. More disturbing were the destinations, not vampire covens, but apothecaries and healers' guilds. The chalice's reach extended through what appeared to be legitimate medicine. Its symbolic value outweighs even its practical uses. Possession of the chalice legitimizes rule among the Volkihar, much like the Amulet of Kings does for the Emperor. When Lord Harkon reclaimed it from the ruins of the Grey Host's eastern stronghold, his bloodline's dominance solidified overnight. Lesser vampires reported visions of the chalice burning in their minds, its image compelling obedience. Scholars at the College of Winterhold theorize it functions as a sort of psychic anchor. The closer a vampire is to the original Volkihar strain, the stronger its pull. This would explain why Harkon's daughter, Serana, despite centuries of isolation, felt its call guiding her back to Castle Volkihar. The chalice also plays a crucial role in the Volkihar's long-term ambitions. During the Tyranny of the Sun Prophecies activation ritual, it acted as a conduit, funneling the accumulated power of countless feedings into the ceremonial arrows. Had the ritual succeeded, the chalice would have become a permanent fixture in Skyrim's new order, a dark counterpart to the Gildergreen, its roots spreading vampiric energy through the land itself. Even in failure, its importance persists. Recent activity near the Volkihar docks suggests renewed efforts to transport it, possibly to new strongholds being prepared across northern Tamriel. What makes the chalice truly unique is its selectivity. Unlike most Daedric artifacts that bend to any wielder's will, this one rejects impure blood. Attempts by non-vampires to harness its power result in violent expulsions, the contents either evaporating instantly or, in one documented case, transforming into flesh-eating scarabs. Even among vampires, not all can fully utilize it. The Dawnguard's captured notes describe experiments where turned mortals drank from the chalice, only to combust, their limited bloodlines unable to contain the surge. This exclusivity makes it the ultimate symbol of vampiric supremacy, a weapon that literally cannot be wielded by their enemies. The chalice's design holds clues about vampirism's origins. Its outer surface depicts scenes most scholars initially mistook for torture. Figures writhing in agony, mouths open in screams. But closer inspection reveals a pattern. Each sufferer's position mirrors documented stages of vampiric transformation. The artist wasn't illustrating torment. They were recording a process. Molag Bal may have gifted the chalice not just as a tool, but as an instruction manual. His vision of how vampirism should propagate. This raises unsettling questions about whether the Volkihar are following his design or diverging from it with their selective breeding programs. Today, the chalice remains under heavy guard in Castle Volkihar's inner sanctum, its base fused to the stone altar by layers of frozen blood. Attempts to study it firsthand remain impossible. The few scholars who've gotten close describe an overwhelming compulsion to kneel, even through protective wards. Perhaps it's best that way. Some artifacts demand distance, not because they're too powerful to use, but because using them reshapes the wielder as much as the world. In the Volkihar's case, they've already crossed that threshold. Their very architecture now mirrors the chalice's curves. Their strategies revolve around its capabilities, their dreams no doubt steeped in its dark resonance. Yet for all its power, the chalice isn't the only artifact shaping Skyrim's vampiric landscape. Another relic waits in the wings, Oriel's bow, capable of turning the tyranny of the sun prophecy from failed ritual into imminent reality. Its story intertwines with the chalices in ways even the Volkihar don't fully comprehend. The tyranny of the sun prophecy hangs over Tamriel like a smothering shadow, a promise that one day vampires will walk freely in daylight without fear of burning. At the heart of this prophecy lies Oriel's bow, an artifact so potent it doesn't just fire arrows, but concepts. Forged in the pits of Cold Harbor from the bones of a lesser Daedra, the bow exists in two states simultaneously. When wielded by a daylight creature, it fires shafts of concentrated sunlight. But in a vampire's grip, its arrows become needles of darkness, capable of piercing the sun itself. This duality makes it the ultimate weapon in the Volkihar's arsenal, and their failed attempt to use it reveals just how close they came to reshaping reality. The bow's origins trace back to a figure known only as the daughter of Cold Harbor, a vampire so ancient, even the Volkihar whisper her name sparingly. Legends claim she bargained with Molag Bal for a weapon that could unmake the day, offering her mortal descendants as payment. The resulting artifact didn't just draw power from her bloodline, it actively consumed it. Each shot required a sacrifice, not just any victim, but someone sharing the wielder's bloodline. Lord Harkon proved willing to pay this cost during the Prophecies ritual, though his daughter Serana's defiance ultimately thwarted him. The bow's true danger lies in its scalability. Had the ritual succeeded, secondary effects would have rippled across Tamriel. Plants reliant on sunlight would wither, crops would fail, and mortals, deprived of the sun's revitalizing touch, would grow weaker over generations, easier prey for the rising vampiric nation. Cosmically, the bow twists natural laws. Unlike most artifacts that simply channel magic, Oriel's bow interacts directly with Magnus, the celestial body representing the sun's divine origin. Mages studying its aftermath found residual magic unlike anything in recorded history. The College of Winterhold's archives describe it as negative light, a phenomenon where sunlight doesn't just get blocked, but actively unwritten. This explains why Volkihar operatives spent years gathering Eclipse charts before the ritual. They needed moments when the barrier between Mundus and Aetherius was thin enough for the bow's arrows to reach Magnus directly. The bow's physical construction hides chilling details. Its string isn't fiber or sinew, but a solidified strand of void energy that hums at frequencies painful to mortal ears. The grip molds itself to the user's hand, leaving permanent indentations resembling bite marks. Most telling are the inscriptions along its limbs. Not enchantments, but tallies. Each notch represents a successful shot, and forensic analysis reveals at least 17 were made before Harkin acquired it. This raises unsettling questions about previous attempts to enact the prophecy and whether fragments of those failed rituals still linger in the atmosphere. Strategic records recovered from Castle Volkihar show they never viewed the bow as a mere weapon. Diagrams depict it as the centerpiece of a larger mechanism, a sort of metaphysical siege engine designed to puncture the sun's essence and drain it like a tapped vein. The Bloodstone Chalice was meant to catch this essence, creating an infinite blood substitute that would eliminate vampires' need to hunt. This wasn't just about removing their weakness to sunlight. It was about removing sunlight's influence entirely, reshaping Tamriel into a world where darkness became the natural state. Yet the bow retains capabilities beyond its intended purpose. When the Dragonborn used it against Harkon, the arrows displayed adaptive properties, shifting from anti-sunlight to anti-vampiric, depending on the target. Some scholars argue this proves the artifact has a will of its own, intervening when balance tips too far in one direction. Others believe it simply mirrors the wielder's deepest desire, meaning Harkon's obsession with darkness inherently created a counter-arrow in his opponent's hands. The aftermath of the failed ritual left the bow diminished, but not destroyed. Its residue lingers in places where reality briefly tore. Certain caves in Skyrim now experience permanent darkness despite surface openings, and travelers report patches of ground so cold they crack leather soles. Vigilance of Stendar monitoring these zones detect trace amounts of the bow's magic, suggesting it's rebuilding its power gradually. Perhaps it's waiting for another daughter of Cold Harbor to reclaim it. Or perhaps Molag Bal himself will intervene next time. What's clear is that artifacts like Oriel's bow don't merely serve vampire kind. They redefine what vampirism means. Just as the Bluntstone Chalice perfected blood magic, the bow offers a path to transcend sunlight itself. And while the Valkyhar's attempt failed, the blueprint remains. Somewhere in Tamriel, another bloodline studies their mistakes, waiting for the right moment to finish what Harkon started. The rings worn by vampire lords suggest they've already begun adapting their strategies. Instead of eliminating sunlight, perhaps they'll learn to weaponize it against their enemies. The Ring of the Beast and the Ring of the Erudite represent vampiric power distilled into wearable form. Unlike typical enchanted jewelry, these artifacts don't just augment abilities. They rewrite the wearer's physical and magical limits. The Ring of the Beast manifests as a crude band of black iron, set with a pulsating red gem. When worn, it amplifies the vampire's predatory instincts to terrifying levels. Muscles expand beyond natural limits. Claws extend permanently into reinforced talons, and the voice takes on a guttural resonance that triggers instinctive fear in mortals. Battlefield accounts describe wearers moving with unnatural agility, tearing through armored knights like parchment. But the transformation isn't just physical. The ring alters perception. Colors fade, except for shades of red. Sounds mute, except for heartbeats, creating a hyper-focused, hunting trance. The Ring of the Erudite provides the perfect counterbalance. Fashioned from pale silver and carved with cramped, necromantic runes, it enhances the wearer's mental faculties while dampening emotional impulses. Vampires report being able to track multiple conversations across a crowded room simultaneously, solve complex tactical problems in seconds, and maintain perfect recall of every feeding victim's name and location. Its most valuable function lies in illusion magic augmentation. A vampire wearing the erudite can sustain multiple complex spells at once, mesmerizing an entire tavern while simultaneously bending the perceptions of guards outside. Unlike the beast's brutish modifications, the erudite's changes are subcutaneous. Users develop faint, vein-like silver traceries across their temples that pulse when concentrating. Historical records confirm these rings work best in tandem. The Volkihar archives contain accounts of Lord Harkon testing them on lesser vampires during the Second Era. Subjects wearing both artifacts demonstrated a 300% increase in combat effectiveness compared to singular ring bearers. Their most potent interaction creates a feedback loop. The beast's heightened senses feed more data to the erudite enhanced mind, while the erudite's calculated control prevents the beast's bloodlust from causing reckless actions. This synergy explains why the rings are always kept as a set, despite multiple attempts by rival clans to steal one or the other. Battlefield applications are devastating when coordinated. During the Siege of Snowhawk, in one era, 1434, a single vampire lord, wearing both rings, held the city's eastern gate for 3 nights. Eyewitness scrolls describe him anticipating arrow volleys before bows were drawn, dodging spells by reading the subtle muscle twitches of mages, and administering precise bites that turned only the strongest warriors into immediate vampire spawn under his control. The opposing commander's journal notes how the vampires seemed to fight with the savagery of a werewolf and the tactical precision of a Dwemer automaton. Strategic records reveal these artifacts require careful maintenance. The beast gradually atrophies the wearer's humanity. Prolonged use leads to permanent facial distortions and vocal cord damage. The erudite carries its own risks. Users report losing the ability to experience genuine emotion beyond cold calculus. The Volkihar developed a rotation system where lords wear the rings for specific missions rather than continuous use. Lesser vampires undergo psychological evaluations before being allowed to handle either artifact, as the wrong temperament can lead to catastrophic results. One incident in 3E427 saw an overconfident fledgling don the beast and erudite simultaneously, resulting in a massacre of both enemies and allies before he tore off his own hands trying to remove the rings. Production methods remain a closely guarded secret. The few captured notes from Volkihar smiths mention harvesting starving shadows from the void and binding them with silver extracted from dissolved soul gems. What makes the rings truly unique is their adaptability. They resize automatically for any wearer while maintaining perfect balance, suggesting awareness of their user's form. Some scholars theorize they contain fragments of the same energy that birthed the first vampires, making them closer to living things than mere enchanted objects. Modern sightings of these artifacts are rare but telling. During the Dawn Guard conflict, scouts reported seeing a vampire commander coordinating attacks with uncanny precision while moving at impossible speeds. Clear indicators of both rings in use. Their reappearance after centuries of absence suggests the Volkihar are reactivating ancient assets for a reason. With the Bloodstone Chalice recovered and Oriel's bow accounted for, these rings complete a terrifying trifecta of vampiric supremacy, physical dominance, mental control, and now, with the chalice, infinite sustenance. The implications extend beyond warfare. A vampire wearing both rings could infiltrate mortal society undetected for decades, using the erudite to maintain flawless cover identities, while the beast subtly enhances their persuasive abilities. Imagine a merchant guildmaster who always wins negotiations, whose very gaze makes competitors concede, only to later discover entire trade networks have been funneling victims to hidden feeding chambers. This combination of powers makes the rings more than weapons. They're tools for reshaping societies from within. Now consider how these artifacts interact with other vampiric technologies. The rings might amplify the effects of bloodstone chalice infusions, or focus Oriel's bow's destructive potential with surgical precision. Their true potential may not be as standalone items, but as components in a larger vampiric arsenal. Pieces of a puzzle no mortal has yet seen fully assembled. If the Volkiar have been methodically gathering and testing these relics across eras, what might they accomplish when all are brought together? The answer likely lies in their oldest strongholds, where forgotten vaults hold even more dangerous secrets waiting to be awakened. The question of curing vampirism isn't as straightforward as drinking a potion or saying a prayer. Across Tamriel, multiple methods exist, each grounded in different philosophies about what vampirism actually is: a disease, a curse, or something far more complex. The simplest approach involves Phalion in Morthal, who performs a ritual requiring a filled black soul gem. His method treats vampirism as a spiritual corruption, exchanging the tainted soul fragment for a purified one. But it's not foolproof. Records from the College of Winterhold describe cases where recipients regained mortal form, but retained lingering sensitivities, aversion to garlic, occasional blood cravings, or even phantom fangs that reappear during stress. For the vigilance of Stendar, purification requires weeks of painful rituals combining alchemy, prayer, and controlled starvation. Their archives document the exact stages: first flushing the body with moon sugar-infused tonics to weaken the curse, followed by exposure to consecrated light while reciting verses from the Chimel Adabau. The final stage involves ingesting a paste made from ground-up dragon scales, a brutal process that kills unprepared subjects. Success rates hover around 60%, with failures resulting in spontaneous combustion or permanent mental degradation. What makes their approach unique is the insistence on spiritual accountability. Patients must confess every feeding victim's name before treatment begins, a practice that's driven more than one vampire to flee mid-ritual. Ancient Nordic traditions take a markedly different approach. Texts from Brahmunar Sanctuary describe a moth priest immersing the infected in the blood of a freshly slain werewolf under the twin moons. The theory holds that lycanthropy's purity can overwrite vampiric corruption, though results are wildly inconsistent. One account from the Second Era tells of a former vampire who emerged cured, but began transforming uncontrollably during full moons. Only instead of becoming a wolf, his body shifted through various stages of vampirism and lycanthropy at random. The companions now strictly prohibit this method, though rumors persist of Silver Hand remnants still attempting it. Daedric interventions offer another path, albeit with heavy costs. Shrines to Mara have been known to grant cures, but only if the petitioner completes an elaborate series of good deeds first. Protecting travelers, donating to temples, abstaining from blood for a full year. These atonement cures are rare, as most vampires lack the patience or self-control required. More commonly, desperate victims turn to Molag Bal himself, bargaining for reversal through acts of further degradation. One documented case involved a Breton noble who willingly sacrificed his entire household to regain mortality, only to find the cure lasted precisely 365 days before the vampire urges returned, stronger than before. The metaphysical implications of these cures reveal much about vampirism's nature. Mages studying the Phalian method note that the Black Soul Gem doesn't just remove the curse. It replaces part of the subject's animus with vestiges of the trapped soul. This explains why some cured individuals report foreign memories or sudden skill with unfamiliar weapons. The vigilance approach confirms vampirism alters the soul itself, not just the body. Their failed treatments show souls resisting reintegration with purified flesh, suggesting the transformation makes fundamental changes to one's cosmic composition. Ethical debates rage around these methods. Should a vigilant prioritize saving the vampire's soul if it means dozens may die during their lengthy purification? Is it justifiable to use black soul gems, effectively damning another to save one? The Synod outlawed Phalian's ritual in Cyrodiil, not because it didn't work, but due to the spike in soul gem thefts that followed its discovery. Even Mara's atonement cures raise questions. What makes a vampire morally redeemed after a set number of good deeds? These dilemmas explain why many regions lack standardized cure protocols, leaving victims to navigate a patchwork of beliefs and half-tested solutions. Personal accounts from cured vampires paint a mixed picture. Some describe overwhelming gratitude, rediscovering simple pleasures like warm food or sunlight. Others speak of feeling strangely hollow, as if part of them remained undead. A former Volkihar assassin's journal details recurring dreams where he relives past feedings with perfect clarity, but no ability to stop himself. The memories persisting long after his cure. Such cases suggest vampirism leaves scars no ritual can fully erase. Perhaps this explains why some choose to embrace the curse rather than struggle against it, viewing the endless hunt as a price worth paying for power that lingers, even after supposed purification. The most disturbing failed cures reveal unexpected dangers. In one documented incident, in Altmer, subjected to Phalian's ritual, appeared cured, but unknowingly carried dormant vampiric cells. When she later underwent magical healing for an unrelated wound, the cells activated, triggering a hybrid state where she switched between mortal and vampire traits unpredictably. The condition proved contagious. 3 healers who treated her developed similar symptoms within weeks. These cases raise alarming questions. Could vampirism evolve beyond Molag Bal's original design? Are we seeing the emergence of new strains that resist known cures? What becomes clear is that curing vampirism isn't just about reversing a condition. It's about untangling a soul from oblivion's grasp. Every method reflects cultural attitudes toward undeath. From the Nord's brute force lycanthropic solution to the vigilance, meticulous spiritual accounting. The varying success rates suggest vampirism adapts to resist removal, reinforcing theories that it's less a static curse than a symbiotic entity battling for survival. This fluidity explains why some scholars argue vampires shouldn't be cured at all, but studied as examples of mortal daedric fusion. ... These debates take on new urgency with recent discoveries about the Blood Matron's lineage. Their blood contains markers linking directly to LeMay Ball's original strain, showing patterns unseen in modern vampires. If this ancient variant behaves differently under cure attempts, existing rituals may require complete reinvention. The Volkihar's ongoing artifact collection suggests they're anticipating this, possibly preparing not just to defend vampirism, but to actively prevent its cure. Their moves threaten to escalate an already complex moral landscape where every potential cure carries risks as severe as the curse itself. These complications extend beyond individual cases, influencing how entire societies respond to vampiric threats. Some regions implement quarantine systems modeled after disease control, while others treat vampires as criminals to be executed on sight. The lack of consensus creates vulnerabilities that clever vampires exploit, playing one jurisdiction's policies against another's. It's a patchwork of fear, ignorance, and desperation, one that the Volkihar and other clans have spent centuries learning to manipulate. Understanding these dynamics reveals why simply finding a cure isn't enough. The real challenge lies in navigating the cultural and political barriers to administering it. Yet for all these complexities, the search for cures continues. Every healed vampire represents a small victory against Molag Bal's influence, and a potential source of intelligence against future vampiric threats. Their stories prove that even the darkest curses can sometimes be reversed, though never without cost. The question isn't just whether vampirism can be undone, but whether society is willing to pay the price required to do so. That calculation looks different in every hold, every kingdom, and every desperate victim's heart. While individuals wrestle with cures, other forces consider vampirism on a cosmic scale, not as a personal affliction, but as a phenomenon resonating across the planes of existence. This broader perspective reveals connections even the Volkihar don't fully comprehend. Vampirism forces societies across Tamriel to make impossible choices. Is it a disease to be cured, a crime to be punished, or a condition to be managed? Different regions answer differently, creating a patchwork of policies that vampires learn to exploit. In Cyrodiil, the Imperial Legion maintains quarantine colonies where suspected vampires are detained for observation. Records from the Third Era show these facilities became feeding grounds. Corrupt guards would sell prisoners to vampire covens, ensuring only the weakest specimens ever got released. Morrowind takes a more pragmatic approach. The great houses classify vampires based on threat level. Fanged laborers in Telvanni territories work night shifts in fungus farms, wearing enchanted collars that prevent feeding urges. In Redoran districts, vampires can gain citizenship by serving as border scouts, their enhanced senses perfect for spotting invaders in ash storms. This system works until it doesn't. House Halalu's attempt to employ vampires as enforcers ended when entire plantations became blood tax collection points. Skyrim's response is typically Nordic, straightforward, and violent. The companions maintain kill-on-sight policies outside major cities, while Jarls tolerate certain vampire factions as long as they control their feeding. Whiterun's court mage keeps a ledger documenting allowed disappearances, travelers and criminals whose deaths won't spark investigations. This brutal calculus fails when vampires overstep. When a Volkihar emissary drained, the moral questions multiply when children are involved. A famous case in Wayrest involved a 6-year-old girl who contracted vampirism during a plague outbreak. The court debated for weeks: execute her as a monster, attempt Phalian's dangerous cure, or let her family keep her chained in their cellar. The parents chose the cellar. When guards finally inspected 5 years later, they found the girl unchanged physically, but surrounded by the drained bodies of stray animals the family had provided. She's now kept under study at the Mages Guild, her case challenging every assumption about vampiric development. Religious institutions add another layer of complexity. The Temple of Stendarr executes vampires without trial, while Dibellan sects argue some strains of vampirism enhance artistic expression. A surviving journal from a priestess of Kynareth details her crisis of faith after discovering vampiric blood could heal blight disease, at the cost of turning recipients into daylight-fearing addicts. These ethical dilemmas spill into daily life. Innkeepers weigh whether to report nocturnal guests against the risk of angering vampire benefactors. Alchemists debate selling blood substitutes, knowing they enable feeding addictions. Philosophically, vampirism challenges the definition of personhood. The Dwemer's preserved texts speculate about vampire souls registering differently on tonal resonators. Are they still people or something else? Modern mages replicate these experiments with soul gems, finding that captured vampire souls display chaotic resonance, patterns unseen in mortals or Daedra. This fuels debates about rights and protections. Should a vampire who hasn't fed in decades be treated the same as an active predator? Can a centuries-old vampire claim ancestral lands they owned in life? The economic impacts shape policies more than ethics. Markarth's silver mines employ vampire detectors at each shift change, not because the Jarl cares about morality, but because undead workers don't need pay. Falkreath's logging camps take the opposite approach, banning vampires after realizing night operations require expensive, magical lighting. Solitude's shipping guilds pay vampire-run protection rackets because undead guards eliminate piracy more effectively than mortal sailors ever could. Everywhere, the calculus comes down to coin rather than conscience. Personal relationships become minefields. A heartbreaking letter archived at the Bard's College details a farmer's realization that his vampiric wife only pretended to eat stew for 20 years to spare his feelings. Another document describes siblings who took turns letting their infected brother feed, not realizing each bite deepened his bloodlust until he slaughtered them both. These tragedies raise unanswerable questions. How much humanity remains after transformation? When does accommodation become complicity? Legal systems stumble over these cases. A rift in court famously ruled in 4E201 that vampires could inherit property unless convicted of feeding-related crimes. Within months, clever undead were paying addicts to willingly donate blood, exploiting the letter of the law. Windhelm takes a harder line. Any proven vampiric ancestry voids family claims, leading to confiscated estates and bitter inheritance disputes. The lack of uniformity creates opportunities. Vampires migrate between holds, seeking favorable treatment, while mortal families hire vampire hunters operate in this gray area. The Dawnguard claims moral authority, yet their ledgers show payments from nobles wanting rivals eliminated under pretense of undead purges. Vigilance of Stendar preach purity while selling certifications of humanity to wealthy vampires. Even the most idealistic hunters face dilemmas. Is it righteous to kill a vampire who only feeds on bandits? Should a thrall who genuinely loves his undead mistress be freed against his will? Oh, these contradictions explain why vampires thrive despite centuries of persecution. They exploit the gaps between law and morality, between fear and pragmatism. A Volkihar journal captured during the Dawnguard campaign puts it plainly. Mortals cannot decide if we are persons or pests, so they swing between pity and purges. This inconsistency is our greatest fortress as long as societies remain divided. Vampires will continue carving out spaces in the shadows. Their survival depends less on supernatural powers than on understanding one simple truth. Morality is a luxury, but self-interest is universal. This uncomfortable reality connects Tamriel's vampire problem to something far older: civilization's inability to reconcile its ideals with its instincts. While laws and morals create surface-level order, deeper cosmic forces shape vampirism's role in Tamriel. The planes of oblivion don't debate ethics. They simply are, and their influence cannot be legislated away. This fundamental truth explains why mortal efforts to solve vampirism keep failing. Like trying to dam a river with parchment, well-meaning policies collapse under pressures from beyond mortal comprehension. Vampirism doesn't just exist in Tamriel. It's woven into the fabric of oblivion itself. Molag Bal's realm of Cold Harbor mirrors Mundus in twisted ways, with rivers of congealed blood replacing water, and trees made of fused bone. The architecture there isn't built. It's grown from still living flesh that pulses with trapped souls. Vampirism carries echoes of this place, explaining why blood holds such power for the undead. It's not just sustenance. It's a fragment of Cold Harbor's essence, a connection to the Daedric plane that birthed the curse. Namira's influence runs parallel to this. Her sphere of decay and shadow complements Molag Bal's domination, creating an unseen partnership. Ancient texts describe vampiric rituals where devotees consume rotting flesh to commune with her, gaining temporary resistance to sunlight. This duality explains why some vampires exhibit traits beyond the norm. Those with connections to Namira can walk in daylight longer than others, their bodies adapting to decay rather than rejecting it. The interplay between these two forces reveals an uncomfortable truth. Vampirism isn't purely about control or hunger. It's a balancing act between oblivion's competing energies. The dreaming caverns beneath Skyrim offer physical proof of these connections. Explorers report finding structures identical to those in Cold Harbor. Spires of blackened bone, pits filled with humming blood. What's chilling isn't their existence, but how they shift. Return to the same cavern a week later, and the layout may have changed, as if reacting to events in oblivion. Vampires drawn to these sites describe hearing whispers in their sleep, instructions in a language their waking minds can't comprehend. Some believe these locations serve as anchors, tethering Nirn to Molag Bal's realm through the shared blood of the undead. Research from the Mages Guild corroborates this. Soul gems used on vampires resonate at frequencies matching Cold Harbor's background hum. Enchantments powered by undead blood last longer and behave unpredictably, as if infused with extra-dimensional energy. The most compelling evidence comes from the Soul Cairn, where bound vampires exhibit unusual autonomy compared to other trapped souls. They cluster near certain obelisks, whispering to one another in coded phrases that mirror recorded transmissions from oblivion. Whatever bond connects them to Molag Bal, it persists even beyond death. These cosmic ties manifest in practical ways. Vampires sleeping near ley lines report dreams of Cold Harbor's towers, waking with knowledge of future events. Some develop cravings for specific types of blood that correspond to celestial alignments. Werewolf blood during Hircine's hunt, for example. The Volkihar have exploited this for centuries, timing major rituals to coincide with planar convergences. Their castle's lower chambers contain orreries tracking Oblivion's movements, enabling them to predict when their powers will peak. The Blood Matrons add another layer. Their nomadic paths follow dead currents, invisible channels where Oblivion's influence seeps into Tamriel. During their crimson feasts, participants enter trance states resembling those of dark seducers in Cold Harbor. Witnesses describe shared visions of a massive heart pulsing beneath Nirn, its veins extending through every vampire. Whether metaphor or reality remains unclear, but the effect is tangible. Matrons who complete these rites gain temporary abilities mirroring Daedra, like summoning hunger spirits or walking through solid objects. Economically, this connection sustains entire industries. Alchemists pay premium prices for vampire ashes, which amplify potions unpredictably. Smiths outside Windhelm forge void steel by quenching blades in undead blood, creating weapons that harm both mortal and Daedric foes. Even the East Empire Company trades indirectly. Their shipments of moon sugar to Solstheim spiked after discovering it helps vampires resist Cold Harbor's call. These niche markets reveal vampirism's role as an unwilling bridge between worlds. Its byproducts, too valuable to ignore, despite the risks. The implications extend to geopolitics. Somerset's ban on vampire research had less to do with morality than with shutting down a suspected Cold Harbor conduit. Conversely, Morrowind's tolerance stems from practical needs. Their ancestor worship practices already interact with Oblivion regularly. This inconsistency creates vulnerabilities. A coven in Black Marsh recently demonstrated how to manipulate the connection, flooding nearby Daedric portals with tainted blood to weaken their guardians. If others replicate this, the barriers between realms could thin further, with vampires serving as unwitting catalysts. Perhaps most telling is the vampire reaction to these phenomena. Elder undead avoid discussing them, as if sharing knowledge might attract unwanted attention. Younger ones experiment recklessly, chasing visions of godhood. This division parallels the Daedric prince's own rivalries, suggesting vampirism mirrors its creators more than its victims would like to admit. Whatever secrets bind Nirn to oblivion through undeath, they remain half understood by mortals and immortals alike, which may be exactly how Molag Bal intended it. These patterns raise inevitable questions about purpose. Is vampirism merely a byproduct of cosmic forces, or part of some larger design? The answer might lie buried in Tamriel's oldest prophecies, where mentions of blood tides and vein fires intersect with portents of Oblivion's return. What's certain is that every vampire, from the lowliest fledgling to the Abolkahar lords, plays a role in this unseen drama. Whether they know it or not, their actions ripple across dimensions in ways that defy simple morality, making them key pieces in a game where the rules remain unwritten. This cosmic dance between worlds sets the stage for the grandest questions of all. If vampirism reflects Oblivion's architecture, what does that mean for Tamriel's future? The answers might be hidden in prophecies so old, even the elves disagree on their translations. Some speak of twin eclipses and a third moon rising, omens pointing toward a convergence that could redefine undeath entirely. The Volkihar aren't the only ones watching the skies. From hidden libraries to Daedric shrines, forces are aligning in anticipation of something even vampires might fear. The twilight prophecies etched into the walls of Forgotten Vale tell of twin crimson moons rising over a frozen sea. According to the Blood Matrons, this celestial event heralds the Blood Tide, a time when every vampire in Tamriel will hear Molag Bal's voice simultaneously. Ancient cave paintings beneath Lake Ilinalta depict crowds of undead walking into the ocean as the moons align, their bodies dissolving into a red mist that stains the waves for miles. The Volkihar dismiss these visions as peasant superstition, yet their own ancestor tablets describe similar omens preceding the fall of ancient civilizations. Historical records confirm eerie patterns. The Alessian Order's texts mention entire vampire covens vanishing during the First Era's Moonless War, only to reappear decades later with no memory of where they'd been. Excavations in Bangkorai uncovered mass graves dating to these disappearances, each skeleton bearing identical puncture marks on the wrists rather than the neck, as if the victims willingly offered blood. The common thread? Astronomical logs show lunar eclipses occurred within days of each event. The Crimson Succession prophecy adds another layer. Passed down through Namira's cults, it states that when a daughter of Coldharbour gives birth during the Blood Tide, her child will become a living conduit to oblivion. Cyrodiilic vampire hunters documented attempted fulfillments. In 2E 341, a Dunmer noblewoman turned vampire, deliberately conceived during an eclipse. The resulting infant dissolved into shadow upon taking its first breath, leaving behind a permanent rift near Leowin that still emits whispering sounds. Cosmologically, these prophecies intersect at Oblivion's structure. Mages using telescopic spells observe that Cold Harbor's plane actually pulses rhythmically, its expansions coinciding with Tamriel's vampiric activity spikes. The Twin Moons prophecy may simply be describing this resonance made visible when the Daedric realm's energy bleeds through to Mundus. It temporarily overwrites natural laws. This explains why older vampires instinctively stockpile blood before eclipses, as if preparing for some unseen tax. The Volkihar's contradictory behavior reveals their private calculations. While publicly mocking the prophecies, they've secretly constructed an astronomical chamber beneath their castle, with orreries tracking all major celestial bodies. Their journals speak of harvest seasons timed to planetary alignments, when feeding yields double the normal potency. During the sun's death eclipse of 4E98, observers reported every vampire in Hafengar freezing simultaneously, their eyes glowing red for exactly 13 seconds before resuming activity. None would speak of what they'd seen. Modern vampire clans position themselves for these events differently. The Cyrodiilic vampires quietly acquire properties along lunar ley lines, while the Grey Host remnants tattoo eclipse dates on their thralls' skin as living calendars. Most alarming are the fringe cults, like the Hollow Fang, who believe drinking the blood of werewolves during the blood tide will make them immune to silver. Their failed experiments litter Skyrim's wilderness, twisted hybrids that howl at the moons, while their flesh sloughs off in sheets. Archaeological evidence supports parts of the lore. Dwemer ruins contain mechanical calculators that still predict eclipse dates with perfect accuracy, their gears inscribed with vampiric runes. Ayleid wells in Black Marsh bubble with blood-red water whenever the Twin Moons prophecies described conditions approach. Even the Altmer's moth priests reluctantly admit their oldest scrolls reference vein migrations that occur in cycles matching Cold Harbor's pulsations. The implications stretch beyond vampirism. Temporal records show increased Daedric incursions during these periods, not just from Molag Bal's forces, but from other princes capitalizing on the weakened barriers. This suggests the prophecies describe intersections in Oblivion's own power struggles, with vampires serving as unwitting pawns. Some scholars theorize the Twin Moons aren't celestial bodies at all, but metaphorical representations of competing Daedric spheres briefly aligning. For all the speculation, one fact remains. Vampires themselves don't fully understand these cycles. Elder Undades report simultaneous nightmares before major events, seeing visions of a black citadel where their collective consciousness momentarily gathers. Younger vampires experience urges to travel to specific locations, often remote ancestral sites, only to find other undead converging there instinctually. Whether this is biological programming or supernatural compulsion remains hotly debated in covens across Tamriel. The Volkar's recent movements hint at preparations. Their agents scour Skyrim for artifacts linked to lunar magic, while castle renovations suggest they're reinforcing for some impending event. More telling is their sudden interest in the College of Winterhold's star charts. Not the copies, but the original Elder Scrolls themselves. Whatever they seek, it's clear they believe the prophecies merit serious attention, despite their public dismissals. These patterns form a disturbing mosaic. When you track vampire activity against cosmic events, a rhythm emerges, peaks and valleys that coincide with historical catastrophes. The question isn't whether the prophecies hold truth, but how many layers remain unread. Tamriel's fate may already be written in the phases of invisible moons, its people mere players in a drama spanning the voids between worlds. Molag Bal didn't create vampirism randomly. He engineered a celestial clock, one whose alarm is set to ring again soon. The hands are moving, the mechanisms turning, and every vampire in Tamriel hears the ticking in their bones. Some flee from it, others rush to meet it, but none can escape their role in whatever comes next. These cosmic undercurrents lead us to Cold Harbor itself, not just as a distant realm, but as the blueprint for vampirism's ultimate purpose. Its blood-soaked spires cast long shadows that reach further than anyone suspects. Cold Harbor isn't just another plane of oblivion. It's the dark mirror of Tamriel, a twisted reflection where every landmark has been reshaped by Molag Bal's cruelty. The rivers flow with congealed blood that never fully solidifies, moving like sludge between towering spires of fused bone. The ground isn't earth, but layers of compressed souls, their faces still visible beneath your feet if you look closely enough. This is the realm that birthed vampirism, and its architecture explains why the curse functions the way it does. At the center of Cold Harbor lies the Basilica of Torment, where the first vampires were created. The building's design reveals Molag Bal's intentions. Its pillars are shaped like fangs, the arches resemble outstretched claws, and the altars are designed to maximize suffering. Beneath the basilica, massive blood pools stretch for miles, each one containing the essence of a different vampire bloodline. These Genesis sites still influence vampires on Nirn. When a new vampire is turned, their blood momentarily connects to these pools, which explains why some report visions of Cold Harbor during transformation. The younger the bloodline, the clearer the vision. Descendants of Lame Bal often describe seeing her original violation play out in fragments. The soul architecture here follows rules that defy mortal understanding. Captured souls aren't just tormented, they're repurposed. Necromancers who've escaped Cold Harbor describe soul gems growing like crystals from the walls, each containing dozens of fragmented consciousnesses stitched together. This explains why vampirism corrupts the soul so thoroughly. When a vampire feeds, they're not just drinking blood. They're replicating Cold Harbor's cycle of consumption and rebirth on a smaller scale. It's why captured vampire souls behave erratically in black soul gems. They're already partially anchored to Molag Bal's domain. The Bloodlords of Cold Harbor exemplify vampirism's endpoint. Ancient entities are so powerful, they've become more Daedra than mortal. Their forms shifting between humanoid and monstrous, depending on their hunger. Some have wings of stretched skin, others mouths that split their torsos vertically. What makes them terrifying isn't their appearance, but their hierarchy. They organize themselves in exact mimicry of the mortal families they once belonged to, maintaining twisted versions of ancestral traditions. One particularly notorious bloodlord still feasts with his undead descendants every night, reenacting meals where the main course is always a screaming soul plucked from the grounds beneath them. Research from the Mages Guild confirms these connections. Spells cast with vampire blood as a component show traces of Cold Harbor's signature resonance. Enchanters note that weapons dipped in undead blood develop properties similar to those forged in Oblivion. Increased durability, unnatural sharpness, and a faint whispering when swung. Even more telling are the reports from conjurers who've summoned creatures from other planes. Daedra from Cold Harbor react instinctively to vampires, showing either deference or hostility based on the vampire's bloodline. This suggests the connection isn't just magical, but ingrained in Oblivion's very fabric. The rebirth paradox presents the greatest mystery. Vampires who die in Cold Harbor don't dissipate like other souls. They reform over time, often in the blood pools where their lineage originated. Accounts differ on whether they retain their memories, but captured journals from the Soul Cairn describe vampires whispering about the other life, as if remembering previous incarnations. This cyclical existence mirrors the Daedric nature of returning upon destruction, suggesting vampirism slowly transforms its victims into something neither mortal nor pure Daedra. Molag Bal's fingerprints are everywhere in this system. The deliberate suffering, the cyclical consumption, the way even rebellion against him serves his purposes. Every element reinforces his sphere of domination. Vampires who resist their hunger still feed his power through their struggles. Those who embrace it become his unwitting missionaries, spreading Cold Harbor's influence with every bite. The plane's design ensures there's no true escape, only varying degrees of servitude. Recent discoveries have added troubling dimensions to this understanding. Excavations beneath Winterhold uncovered a chamber where Nirn's ley lines intersect with Cold Harbor's energy. The patterns in the stone match the Basilica of Torment's architecture exactly, implying the connection isn't one way. If Mundus can passively replicate Oblivion's structures, it raises questions about what else might be bleeding through. Some scholars speculate this is why certain regions, like Skyrim's Pale, attract so many vampires. The land itself resonates with Cold Harbor's frequency. The Volkihar seem to have known this for centuries. Their castle's lower levels are built directly over one of these convergence points, amplifying their powers. Their rituals often coincide with measured spikes in planar alignment, suggesting they monitor these fluctuations carefully. When you track their movements against the arcane charts, a pattern emerges. They're not just waiting for the tyranny of the sun prophecy. They're preparing for something bigger, something rooted in the very nature of Cold Harbor's bond to Nirn. These connections raise a final, unsettling possibility. If vampirism is essentially a slow transformation into a lesser Daedra, then Tamriel's undead aren't just cursed individuals. They're the vanguard of an invasion, happening one soul at a time. The internal conflicts between vampire clans might reflect something deeper, competing visions for how thoroughly Molag Bal's domain should overwrite their world. With each new vampire turned, the barrier thins a little more, and Cold Harbor waits, patient as the grave, for its chance to claim what it sees as already theirs. But this isn't just a story about domination. Even within Cold Harbor's nightmares, there are fractures, instances where the system fails, where vampires defy their nature. These exceptions hint that the realm's control might not be absolute, and where there's weakness, there's opportunity. For rebellion, for redemption, or for forces even older than Molag Bal to intervene. The twilight struggle between vampiric factions might decide Tamriel's fate, but the battle lines were drawn long ago, in a realm where the sky burns black and the rivers never stop screaming. The vampire clans of Tamriel aren't united. They're locked in a silent war, older than most mortal nations. The Volkihar see themselves as pure-blood elites, dismissing the Cyrodiilic covens as weaklings, hiding behind mortal masks. In turn, the Cyrodiilic vampires view the Volkihar as blunt instruments, wasting their potential on territorial squabbles. These divisions run deeper than arrogance. They reflect fundamental disagreements about what vampirism means. Should they rule openly as predators or manipulate society from the shadows? Is their condition a curse to endure or a gift to expand? Answer wrong, and you might find rival fangs in your throat. Daedric interference fans these conflicts. Molag Bal isn't the only prince with vested interests. Their Mina experiments on sleeping vampires, planting nightmares that drive them to madness. Sanguine hosts grotesque feasts where rival clans are tricked into breaking blood oaths. Records from the Somerset archives describe a coven tearing itself apart after Mephala convinced members they could gain sunlight immunity by draining each other dry. These manipulations aren't random, they're stress tests. The princes want to see which vampire philosophies prove strongest under pressure. The mortal world adds complications. Skyrim's Jarls turn a blind eye to vampire activity until nobles disappear. Imperial governors selectively enforce anti-vampire laws, using them as political tools. This inconsistency creates openings clans exploit. When Riften's Guard cracked down on undead brothels, the Volkihar leaked evidence that the captain frequented them, discrediting the entire operation. Meanwhile, in Morrowind, vampire-run plantations thrive by paying off ordinators with black soul gems. These short-term victories mask deeper vulnerabilities. Every mortal ally can become a liability when witch hunts begin. Cosmic forces escalate tensions. The anchor theory suggests certain bloodlines serve as metaphysical conduits for oblivion. Dwemer texts found in Markarth describe vampiric energy patterns clustering around specific bloodlines during celestial events. This explains why the Volkihar guard their lineage so fiercely. Whoever controls these anchors could theoretically influence how oblivion manifests in Tamriel. During the sun's death eclipse, Vigilance documented concentrated vampiric activity at 8 precise locations across Skyrim. When mapped, these points formed a sigil matching Cold Harbor's sigil, suggesting the anchors were deliberately placed. Internal power struggles follow predictable cycles. Younger vampires chafe under ancient traditions, while elders cling to proven strategies. The Volkihar succession crisis of 2E812 saw 3 generations of vampires warring. The eldest favored isolation, the middle wanted controlled integration, and the youngest advocated outright conquest. Their fighting grew so violent, it attracted the Dawn Guard's precursors, who slaughtered most of them. Similar patterns emerge across history. The same debates resurface every few centuries, with new casualties. Practical survival often outweighs ideology. When the Thracian plague devastated Tamriel, even bitter rivals shared feeding grounds to avoid starvation. Modern covens maintain tentative alliances through blood debt systems. A vampire who saves another's thrall can call in favors later. These pragmatic arrangements fracture easily. The Black Bargain between Wayrest's vampires and the Fighters Guild collapsed when a fledgling drained a guildmaster's daughter, proving no alliance with mortals lasts forever. Cultural differences complicate cooperation. Breton vampires raised on tales of King Edward see themselves as nobility, while Dunmer bloodlines view vampirism as a step toward godhood. These worldviews collide during rare gatherings like the Crimson Conclave, where disputes over feeding protocols have sparked more violence than actual debates. A Nord vampire's idea of restraint, only killing travelers, strangers, might horrify a Cyrodiil coven that sees murder as wasteful. When thralls live longer, the rise of hunter organizations forces adaptation. Vigilance of Stendar's raids taught vampires the value of safe houses and coded communication. Dawnguard patrols ended the era of overt castle building, pushing clans into mobile units. This pressure creates odd bedfellows. In 402nd Era, 201, surviving members of the Grey Host partnered with forsworn tribes, exchanging blood magic for mountain hideouts. Necessity trumps pride. When extinction looms, artifacts become flashpoints. When the ring of the Ariadite surfaced in Solitude's black market, it triggered a bidding war that left 12 vampires permanently ash. Such relics aren't just tools. They're symbols of legitimacy. Controlling Oriel's bow means influencing the tyranny of the Sun Prophecies outcome. These struggles mirror mortal dynastic conflicts, complete with assassinations and forged lineages. Yet for all their infighting, vampires share an unspoken understanding. They're collectively damned. Even bitter enemies will ignore each other during existential threats like the Soul Burst or Dragonfire's reignition. This paradox defines their civilization. Eternal rivals bound by cursed blood. Their conflicts aren't signs of weakness, but growing pains. An entire species struggling to define itself between mortal origins and oblivion's pull. These tensions won't resolve peacefully. History shows vampire conflicts only end when external forces intervene or one side achieves total domination. With the Volkihar resurgent and ancient prophecies stirring, Tamriel's undead stand at a crossroads, continue fracturing, or unite behind a shared vision. Neither path guarantees survival, but both will reshape the world. The lasting irony. Mortals fear vampire unity, but their greatest protection has always been the undead's inability to stop fighting amongst themselves. As long as bloodlines blame each other for their condition, they'll never realize their full potential, or pose the threat the Daedric princes secretly hope they'll become. This fragile balance between cooperation and betrayal defines their twilight civilization, ensuring their story remains as complicated as the curse that created it. ... And that story is far from over. Next time you walk Skyrim's roads at night, remember, you're traversing a battleground older than the First Empire, where every shadow might conceal another move in their endless game. Who knows? Maybe you'll spot the signs of their next great conflict brewing. Just hope you're not there when it erupts. Vampires have shaped Tamriel's history more than most realize. Their influence stretches from the First Era's bloody conflicts to the political intrigues of the Fourth. Unlike mortal rulers who rise and fall within decades, vampire factions operate on timescales that span centuries, each decision rippling across generations. The Volkihar's conquests, the Cyrodilic's manipulations, even the Blood Matron's wanderings aren't isolated events. They're threads in a tapestry, older than the empire itself. Look at any major historical turning point, and you'll find vampiric fingerprints. The Alessian Order's purges coincided with the Grey Host's defeat, not by accident. Documents from the Imperial Library reveal commanders finding tactical maps in abandoned vampire lairs, suggesting the host's movements inadvertently led the Order to other undead strongholds. The Oblivion Crisis saw vampires exploiting chaos to claim territory. Countless missing persons reports from that era match known feeding patterns. Even the Great War played out differently in regions with heavy vampire activity, as both sides avoided areas where undead ambushes decimated scouts. This endurance stems from adaptability. When mortal societies outlaw vampirism, clans evolve. After the Mages Guild banned necromancy, vampire covens absorbed exiled practitioners, gaining new ways to preserve and manipulate blood. The rise of the Dawn Guard forced undead to develop coded communication systems, carving symbols into tree bark, leaving specific flowers on graves as warnings. Their survival strategies become case studies in resilience. A captured Volkihar journal describes storing emergency blood supplies in ice wraith corpses during a particularly harsh winter. A tactic modern alchemists still study for preservation techniques. Their impact on culture runs deep. Nordic children's rhymes about the pale traveler likely reference vampire thrall recruiters. Breton vampire courts inspired generations of Gothic literature. Morrowind's temple openly acknowledges undead saints, blurring lines between reverence and fear. Even language reflects their imprint. Terms like blood money and night politics trace back to vampire-influenced mercantile systems. The East Empire Company's earliest ledgers show payments to nocturnal consultants, thinly veiled references to undead advisors who helped navigate regional conflicts. Cosmically, their significance grows clearer. Mages studying the stars note that vampiric activity spikes during specific celestial alignments, periods when the barriers between Oblivion and Nirn thin. The Blood Matron's migration routes mirror ancient Iliad star charts, suggesting their journeys serve purposes beyond mere survival. Artifacts, like the Bloodstone Chalice, resonate with energies that counter Aedric influence, acting as anchors for Daedric power. When viewed through this lens, vampires aren't just predators. They're living conduits in a much larger metaphysical balance. Their twilight civilization thrives in paradox. They create elaborate art, yet practice grotesque rituals. They build libraries preserving millennia of knowledge, while erasing histories that threaten their secrecy. A single vampire might spend decades meticulously restoring an ancient text, only to burn it when its contents risk exposure. This duality defines them, both guardians and destroyers of culture. The Cyrillic's greatest masterpiece, an opera composed entirely by thralls under hypnotic suggestion, premiered to mortal audiences who never suspected its true creators. Economically, their networks rival the Empire's. Black market ledgers confiscated in Anvil reveal vampire-run smuggling operations, moving everything from skooma to stolen Dwemer artifacts. Financing comes from unlikely sources, abandoned mines reopened by undead laborers who need no light or air, haunted mansions converted into luxurious feeding grounds for wealthy patrons. Their most valuable commodity isn't blood or gold, but information. A vampire who's witnessed 3 centuries of trade fluctuations makes an invaluable advisor. Assuming one can stomach the cost, the conflicts between clans aren't petty squabbles, but ideological clashes with existential stakes. When the Volkihar clash with the Cyrodiilic, it's not just about territory. It's a debate over vampirism's future. Should they remain hidden, weaving themselves into society's fabric, or emerge as rulers, reshaping Tamriel in their image? These tensions mirror the same struggles mortals faced during the Dragonborn Emperor's reign, proving some dilemmas transcend lifespan. What makes them fascinating isn't their power, but their contradictions. They embody mortality's fears and immortality's burdens. A single vampire might save a village from plague one decade and slaughter its descendants the next, not out of malice, but because centuries shift perspectives. Their moral compasses spin differently when you've watched kingdoms rise and fall like seasons. As we near the present age, their influence grows subtler but no less profound. Modern vampires don't need castles when they own banks, don't require brute force when they control information. The next chapter of their story won't be written in blood-soaked battlefields, but in boardrooms and back alleys, where the right whisper can topple nations. Their greatest weapon remains time itself, and unlike mortals, they've learned to wield it patiently. The dark gift isn't just immortality, it's the ability to play the long game, to see history not as a series of events, but as a tapestry they've helped weave. Every decision, every alliance, every betrayal across thousands of years has led to this moment. And the next move could reshape Tamriel forever. Whether that future brings tyranny or some twisted form of coexistence remains unseen. But one thing's certain, vampires won't fade quietly into the night. Their story is still being written, and its final chapters promise revelations that might redefine what it means to be immortal. Yet for all their power and planning, even the eldest vampires can't predict everything. The final cards in this game may belong to forces older than Molag. Vampirism isn't just about immortality. It's a cosmic bargain where every gain comes with loss. The power to live forever is measured in stolen years. The strength to crush enemies balanced by eternal hunger. From Lamé Ball's brutal transformation to the Volkihar's frozen dominion, this curse reshapes souls as much as bodies. Some embrace it, others fight it, but none escape unchanged. So where would you stand? Would you drink from the bloodstone chalice for power, or resist like the vigilance, despite the cost? The choice defines more than your fate. It echoes through oblivion itself. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into Tamriel's darkest secrets. Your support fuels these explorations. What topic should we uncover next? The Elder Scrolls mysteries run deeper than blood.